What's up, everybody? I'm Brett L. Pape, and I'm with Coach Bruce, and this is Week 5 of the Coach Approach. Coach, how you doing, brother? Looks like you're in a hotel again. Where are you at?
I am. I'm in the Inland Empire here in Southern Cal. So I've got long days this week, going out and entertaining customers and trying to sell all the freight that I can. But here we are, man. So
There you are.
try not to ever miss time with you, brother.
There you go. I appreciate it. The irony is now that we're only about 20 miles away from each other. Of course, if I were to try or you were to try to drive it, it would take us 2 hours. But that's LA traffic. Let's get right into it, Coach. And before we get into this week's injuries, like we always start, just kind of wanted everybody to know, hey, if you got questions, we'd love to take them. Any start, sit, any trade type of questions, send them in. You can always ask questions on our Twitter page. It's the coach at the Coach Approach FF. We love interacting with you guys, and we'd love to do that all show long if that's what it took. So injuries from week 4. Every week it seems to happen, and I don't know why anyone should be surprised when you look at the athletic ability, the speed, and the size of these guys, and just it's a brutal sport. So last week was no different. Let's start right off with the Miami situation at quarterback. A week after he got beat up, last week he gets beat up again up at Bengals. Tua is out. He's in concussion protocol, and they've already knocked him out for this week. So your thoughts on the offense going forward and how you think it'll look for the receivers and the rest of the guys in that Miami offense?
You know, I did a big write-up on Teddy Bridgewater going in last year with Denver and, of course, what he did with Carolina the year prior. And Teddy Bridgewater's always been a very good game manager. He's not going to throw for a ton of yards. He's not going to throw for a ton of touchdowns. He's typically going to protect the football. He's got 72 career touchdowns versus just 44 interceptions. Now, 2-to-1 ratio is not great, but he protects the football a little bit. Not quite as bad as Drew Lock and some other quarterbacks we've seen come through Denver and Carolina. But he's never had receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, 2 guys, sub 4.4 guys. He catch any route in the route tree and turn it into a home run, turn it into a big play. So it's going to be interesting. I think the scheme this week with Mike McDaniel is going to be the run game is not great, although they brought in Raheem Mostert. He seems to have improved. He's getting more snap share. He seems to be the guy taking the lead there versus Chase Edmonds. But I look for them to condense the offense a little bit for Teddy Bridgewater, try to get the ball out of his hands quickly, use that short to intermediate, maybe some screen game, and get Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting you, even if it's 4 to 5 yards on a screenplay that gets you in the second short, gets you in manageable situations on second, third down. I think that's what Teddy B does well. The Tua situation, I've been that guy as a receiver. I remember taking a screen, a middle screen, and getting just absolutely ear-holed by a linebacker. And I woke up on the bench. I had no idea what was going on. Back then, mid to late 90s, I'm not going to age myself. When I was playing college ball, it was, you could go back in the game. Someone checked you out. If you could do the alphabet backwards, you could tell them where you were at and what city you were in and what was going on. You could find your way back out on the field. But a little bit different situation now with Tua. And hey, we can beat it up. Everybody's touched on it. I hated it. I didn't like it. It was a scary situation. I'm glad he seems to be moving forward. I'm glad they're finally taking their time to evaluate this thing correctly. But I'm looking forward to, when Tua does get back and see if he can pick up on where this offense was. I mean, dude, they're 3-1 in Miami.
Yeah, and they've looked good being that 3-1. So obviously we both hope that. Yeah, obviously we hope that he gets back and they can just kick it right off again. Moving on to the injury that really kind of hurts most of fantasy football community. It's another a young running back. It seems to be a couple every year. It's last year it was Travis Etienne, it was Cam Akers, and now we have Javonte Williams. Suffers an ACL injury, also an MCL. I mean, it seems like everything you could do to a knee, he did to it, unfortunately. That happened in the Raider game, a game that they lost. And it hasn't really been going for him too much this year, whether it be the backfield share with Melvin Gordon, but it did look like he was kind of starting to take more of the lead role. But he's had 47 attempts for 204 yards for 4.3 yards per carry, no touchdowns. But in the passing game, he gives you 16 receptions for another 76 yards. Tough loss, yet more ammunition for those guys who always like to kind of fade running backs early and try and pick them up later, because knowing that you're probably going to lose a couple, and they'd rather not take a chance with a high pick. But Javonte Williams out for the rest of the year, torn ACL.
Yeah, huge loss for Denver. I know the run game as a whole has not looked great. I mean, you kind of went through Javonte Williams' numbers there. If you look at Melvin Gordon over the last 2 games, well, first off, on the year, he's got 4 fumbles lost. That's a problem. On 45, I think it's 45 total touches. And
that fumble, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the fumble against the Raiders, it really looked like that was going to be more ammunition to just let Williams take the job and kind of go off by himself with it. But then not much later,
Yeah, and you saw Mike Boone out-touched him after that fumble. But Melvin Gordon over the last 2 games, 15 carries for just 34 yards, 2.2 yards a carry. He does have, and he's only got the 1 touchdown all season. That's that guy inside the 5, goal line, short yardage situations they tend to lean on a little bit. But it's funny if you look at the waiver wires, right? It's Mike Boone versus Latavius Murray. How's that going to look if Melvin Gordon does fumble again for the 5th time this year? Who steps in that second role? And this week, I think it's Mike Boone, because he's going to have an opportunity, whereas Latavius Murray just got signed. He's going to have a few days to get some practice in. Obviously, Thursday night games tomorrow. Don't expect to really see much there. But if you go beyond that into the following week, I think that's when you start seeing Latavius Murray probably take over early down work. And I think Mike Boone becomes more of a guy that uses the passing game. But you get ball security with both Latavius Murray, Mike Boone, who's never fumbled in the NFL on not nearly the same number of touches. And then you get, Latavius Murray's only got, I think, in the last 650 touches, he hasn't lost a fumble. So 2 guys that can secure the football.
But, for me, as an outside observer who doesn't have any shares of either one of those guys we're mentioning, I'm not running, because you've already mentioned they've struggled to run the ball this year. So why would I run to spend a lot of fab money on an offense that had a superior player struggling in it and replace them with inferior players? So I don't know about you, but I didn't pick either one of them up in my leagues. But it's just sad, because that's a guy that I was really excited about. That's a guy that was in a lot of people's top 10 running backs in Dynasty. And you just got to hope that Javonte Williams comes back healthy and is able to play next year without much.
Yeah,
it was a 2-year injury for Saquon. I mean, you look what Saquon's doing now, and he looks great. So, there isn't lost hope for good old Javonte Williams. Moving on to the next one. And this one hurts to a lot of people who had him as the wide receiver 1 in this rookie class, and that's Trayvon Burks. Suffered a little turf toe and didn't practice today. Seems to be still struggling with it. And if you know anything about the injury, it's one of those ones that can just kind of linger on for a while. And I don't expect him to play this week. I know if he didn't practice today, that certainly doesn't look good for him to play. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him miss a couple games, not just one. And you talk about Javonte Williams' numbers not being what you kind of would hope they were going to be at this point. Traylon's the same situation. In 4 games, he's got 10 receptions for 129 yards, and he's yet to see the end zone. But again, I always preach, be patient with rookies. And, if this was 7, 8, 10 years ago and you had a rookie receiver with those type of stats out of 4 games, you'd be excited about the future. And let's hope Trey can bounce back from his turf toe pretty quick.
Yeah, you've seen Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson just completely ruin expectations for incoming rookie receivers. But Trayvon Burks is a guy, coming out of college, there were some concerns about his average depth of target in college and how he was utilized in some gadget plays, screen game, plays out of the backfield, running more shallow crossing routes. But I think he's got the skill set to be a guy that can win on slant routes. He can win in that short to intermediate. He's a guy that can extend plays where he wants to get the ball in the hands. He's got some physicality to his game. But there's an opportunity for Robert Woods. I was another guy coming off a major injury to step up. Kyle Phillips, you're now getting back and healthy. He did great in the preseason through OTAs. He was a guy that was talked about a lot that earned the trust of Ryan Tannehill and Mike Vrabel. So I'm looking forward to see what Kyle Phillips can do with an increased opportunity now with Trayvon Burks, probably definitely out for certainly this game this week and possibly the following week. And this could be, again, a 2 to 3 week deal. So I'm looking forward to see what they do in the passing game there.
Well, they haven't been able to do much. I think a lot of people expected, a little more from Tannehill at this point. I know he was a favorite of a lot. If you drafted in the Scott Fishbowl and with that scoring system that is very heavy on passing percentage and not throwing interceptions, he was a lot of people's favorite number 2 quarterback on a team last couple years because he was so consistent. But losing A.J. Brown, you can tell that it's affected them. So it's been a rough go so far with them offensively. But I like you. I do like Kyle Phillips a lot. I was really happy when I was able to draft him in startup drafts this year. I feel like he can be a PPR monster and just eat up receptions, but he's not going to give you the big playability. He's the type of guy that can beat you with his route running ability. So if you're looking for a guy that may turn into a Hunter Renfrow, I think Kyle Phillips is that type of player.
Yeah.
Moving on, next one, a 3-1 team loses 2 quarterbacks in a game last week and somehow still managed to get the win. And that's with Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. Jones left the game early with an ankle sprain, but he had to come back into the game after being ruled out because Tyrod Taylor left because of a concussion. According to reports, Daniel Jones looked really good today on the practice field, and it looks like he's full bore moving ahead. And as far as regular NFL football goes, Daniel Jones looked good. He's managed the games. He's put them in positions to win, and he hasn't hurt the team like he can or like he has so much in the past. Fantasy-wise, whether it be the lack of weapons on the outside or whatever it may be, just hasn't really been going aside from, handing the ball off to Saquon.
Yeah, you talk about, Justin Fields in Chicago not having a lot of help with what they put in the skill players at the receiver room, but you can say the same thing about Daniel Jones, Wan'Dale Robinson missing time, Kadarius Toney missing time. Kenny Golladay looks like he's never played football a day in his life. I don't know what's going on there, but they're in shambles. When you're relying on David Sills and Richie James, there's some problems. But I do think that Daniel Jones, I think this is what we expect with Brian Daboll. I think you felt like with what he was able to do with Josh Allen in Buffalo and what he does offensively, putting the quarterback in better situations, I think we have seen some positive, progression in Daniel Jones' game this year. He's had 2 games, it was over 65% completion percentage. He was 17-21. The first game of the season, he's had was 170. I don't have the math in front of me. I think it was like 170 yards rushing, 160 yards rushing over the last 2 games, and he's found the end zone twice. So there are some things that Daniel Jones is doing well, and if you can get him a full complement, I think Daniel Bellinger as a tight end is starting to come on now that he's healthy. I think we'll start to see him have an impact there too. So I'm excited for Daniel Jones, and I'm hoping that he can continue to progress. And I know you and I talked about this before we went live, but if you can save yourself from having to draft a quarterback again or try to make something happen in the offseason, and you can feel like, hey, I think Daniel Jones gives us enough now that Saquon Barkley's fully healthy. I think we can build some pieces around him. They're doing some good things with the offensive line. You can set yourself up at other positions to put yourself in a better situation 2 to 3 years down the road. Whereas if you have to reset and you missed on Daniel Jones or where you took him originally in the draft, it can set you back 3 to 5 years. So I hope it works out for Daniel Jones and his career in New York.
You and me both. I mean, you saw what they did last year. They granted last year's class was not very strong at the quarterback position. I believe there was only 1 quarterback taken in the first round, and we're going to bring him up in a minute. But with that being said, that allowed them to address a need at the offensive line spot and then a need on the defensive line spot. And anytime you can build your team up from the line going out, it makes you better for years to come. So hopefully they'll be able to continue to do that with first-round picks over the next few years. All right, moving on to our next topic, and that's quarterbacks on the move or quarterback moves that are about to be made or have been made. And the first rookie is going to get a real start this week, and maybe 2 rookies getting a start this week. We'll get into the second one in a minute, but the first one is earlier this week. Kenny Pickett is named the starter. His career started. He got in the game late last week. And one half of work, he did a couple things that no one's ever done before. First, he had 2 rushing touchdowns in his debut, and then secondly, he had the most pass attempts with the ball not touching the ground ever in the NFL history. Of course, 3 of them came that way because of interceptions, and unfortunately, the last one led to the game-winning scoring drive for the Jets. But what do you think Kenny Pickett is going to mean for those receivers. There's 3 receivers on their roster that a lot of people are invested in, whether it be Deontay Johnson, whether it be Chase Claypool, or whether it be everyone's darling George Pickens. What do you think Kenny Pickett means for those guys?
I was an advocate of Mitchell Trubisky before the season started. I know some people say, hey, just let Kenny Pickett start the season off. And I was a big proponent of Mike Tomlin has never had a losing record in the NFL. He understands culture. The guys that play for him love playing for him. That I felt like this was a situation where if Mitchell Trubisky could get you, competitive in these games and pull some games out, that you could extend, his shelf life, so to speak, this year. Take your time with Kenny Pickett. Make sure, hey, when we put Kenny Pickett in, we know without a doubt 1,000% the guy's ready. And I think the argument in the offseason was Kenny Pickett was not my number one quarterback after watching film breakdown of the quarterback position. It was Desmond Ritter. I felt like had an opportunity, a good landing spot to potentially be a guy. But if you look at what he did in the game, there were some moments where he looked well. Obviously, he took the two touchdown rushes that he had. But I have some concerns with him being thrown in this early, in Pittsburgh, but behind that offensive line. At least at Mitchell Trubisky, you get, a guy that can get out of the pocket. Is a little bit more mobile. Not that Pickett is a statue by any means, but I do feel like Trubisky's got a little bit more top end speed, can create some plays, and what they were trying to do with him outside the pocket. I would like to see them be able to stick with him longer. But again, this is what happens. Now you're 1-3. And at this point, you've seen what you've seen out of Trubisky. I don't want to go 1-4. Now's the time to play him at this point, based on the record and where the team is at. I don't have a problem with it. I wish we could have waited a little bit longer. I do think this bodes well for George Pickens. I'm concerned about, Chase Claypool and his role in this offense. I thought moving him to be more of a big slot guy could help him kind of, get that next step. I think Deontay Johnson's Deontay Johnson, although so far this year we've seen a very low ADOT. We've seen some receptions. You're not seeing the red zone targets. He has yet to get in the end zone. But there's certainly some concerns there. But I do feel like George Pickens is the guy that probably Kenny Pickett's going to gravitate to. Both guys are rookies. Both guys got a lot of reps early on in preseason, being with the number 2s. So I think there's some chemistry that's probably already there. So I do look for George Pickens to step up.
I'll tell you, they didn't do him any favors when they decided to put him in as the starter. Their next 4 games they got Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Miami, and then Philadelphia. Then they have a week 9 bye. When I looked at the schedule, I kind of thought week 10 was going to be the first time we were going to see him. I thought that made the most sense.
That's how
but
we needed to happen.
The reality of it is this does, to me, whatever happens these next 4 weeks, I should say, doesn't change the fact that you need to get the guy in there and see if you got what you think you got, because otherwise you're just delaying the inevitable, and that's turning the keys over from Trubisky to Pickett. Go ahead and do it now, and let's see what you got. Moving on to the New England Patriots, another rookie quarterback. Mac Jones doesn't look like he's ready to return from his ankle injury. Brian Hoyer is in concussion protocol, and so now you get to see rookie Bailey Zappi. He's in line to make the start, played in the second half, or most of the game, I should say, against in the New England game. Your thoughts on Zappi, and not that there's a lot of people interested in fantasy relevant players at the wide receiver spot or tight end spot right now for the New England Patriots, but nevertheless, what does this mean for them going forward as long as Zappi's in the game?
It's funny because as you're saying this, we're going through it. All I can think of is Bill Belichick has a type, right? This is another guy that is going to want to make a pocket passer out of him, and that's what we're going to do. And Mac Jones fit that label. Tom Brady obviously fit that label. Matt Castle fit that label. You can go on down the line of New England quarterbacks, but Bailey Zappi to me has got to figure out the touch on the football. There was times in that game he had a guy on an over route. It was wide open, and he threw a 3-ball, which is kind of a lob put in the breadbasket, when I felt like it needed to be a 2-ball, which means a little more zip on it, over coverage. But at the same time, let's give that receiver an opportunity to really get some yards after the catch. And, of course, a 1-ball, you're going to fire something in there and throw it on a rope. But those are things that Bailey Zappi is going to have to figure out. I still think New England, what's crazy is when they spent all that money between Geno Smith and Hunter Henry at the tight end position, it really felt like a lot of 12 personnel. Geno Smith's the type of guy, tight end screens, a little more yards after the catch. Hunter Henry's that red zone guy that can do some things for the receiving game, and they still have not figured out what that's going to look like long term. And this is the second year now with those two guys. And Hunter Henry was certainly the guy last year, but still trying to figure that out. But I hope Bailey Zappi does well. I don't think he's going to have to hold the fort down until Mac Jones is ready, and this is his chance to shine. But I think all the talk about Bailey Zappi, potentially being the quarterback in the future, I think we got to pump the brakes. And this is Mac Jones' team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what interests me more so than anything is, do we have a situation like a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where you see Jimmy G get in early on in his career with New England and he shows some signs of him possibly being a starter down the road, whether that be in New England or wherever it ended up being San Francisco? Does Bailey Zappi have the ability to play at the NFL level? And maybe over the next few weeks we'll get to see that. And if he does, that's just might be more ammunition for them to use draft capital or just, do whatever they can with them. Because anytime you can turn somebody you get in the 5th round into a 2nd or 3rd rounder, you got to feel pretty good about that outcome.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Moving on. And here's one that, they're 2-2, and we're talking about the Atlanta Falcons. They're 2-2. Arthur Smith obviously wants to win football. He wants football so much that anytime anyone talks about the usage of Kyle Pitts, he goes back to, look, all I care about is trying to win football games. And I get it, but Marcus Mariota is 26th in passing yards, 28th in quarterback rating, and 30th in completion percentage. He no longer is providing any rushing attack like you thought you would get back in the day when he came out of Oregon. And it got so bad after he threw an interception against Cleveland last week, they ran the ball in 13 consecutive plays just to keep the ball out of his hands. For me, it's forget the 2-2 record, forget the 2-game winning streak. Let's put Desmond Ritter in and see what you have.
Well, and you got the Cordell Patterson injury now in IR, so he's out for the next, 4 games. And so now it becomes the Caleb Huntley, Tyler Algier offense, right, where they ran it again 13 times consecutively, but it was working. I think so. Desmond Ritter was the guy that I had graded above Kenny Pickett, that I felt like in the right situation, if he gets an opportunity to sit for a while, I did have him being the first rookie to see playing time this year, significant playing time at the quarterback position, and we haven't seen it. And I feel like if you're willing to do it in New England, or not New England, in Pittsburgh, why would you not be willing to do it in Atlanta, right? I get they're 2-2. This team isn't going anywhere. And you're going to put the worst place to be in the NFL is like fantasy football, right? If you need a quarterback, if you're middle of the road and you're picking in the middle of the draft and it's a quarterback class that's coming out that's stacked at the top end, you're not getting any of those guys. So why not at this point say, hey, the Mariota experience is over. This is where I feel like we can use Desmond Ritter. You can pound the run game as much as you can. You have Drake London, you have Kyle Pitts. Going back to your comment about Arthur Smith, right? And I loved him when he was in Tennessee, and I thought this would be a good fit for him in Atlanta. Is if you're saying that you're not focused on getting Kyle Pitts the ball, you're focused on winning football, those two things don't go together. You have an elite talent, a guy that's 68 grabs for over 1,000 yards, second best season for a rookie tight end. You drafted him at number 4 overall for a reason. If you don't think trying to scheme ways to get him the football is part of winning, then if I'm the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, I'm like, I got the wrong guy. Yeah. I got the wrong guy. So you can say what you want about fantasy football and players don't care about it, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, if you're at the NFL level and you want to win football games, you get the ball in the hands of your best players. He does it with Cordell Patterson. He started doing it early in the season with Drake London. He's not had been doing it consistently with Kyle Pitts. That's a big problem. But why not put Desmond Raider in at this point? You are who you are.
Right.
I mean, let's go.
What is it that made Ritter your number 1 quarterback coming out? And so if I'm Arthur Smith, what is he getting in Desmond Ritter?
I feel like with Desmond Ritter, you looked at what they did in Cincinnati. First of all, look at the season they had in Cincinnati last year. And I get who the receiving core was. But you can say that about Joe Burrow with the receivers they had at LSU, who was another guy that took him longer to develop, after sitting behind guys in the first 3 years of his college career. I feel like Desmond Ritter was that guy that was the opposite, where he got to play a lot early on. He got to be the guy, and he got to take Cincinnati from basically an unknown to a team that was playing in the college football playoff. And his leadership, if you talk to what scouts wrote about him, the offseason, what NFL teams were saying about him. If you watch his tape, you saw a guy that had some things he had to work on. Was he ready to start week one? No. But is he a guy that you saw enough tools there that if he got in the right system with the right quarterback coach and the right offensive coordinator, there are some intangibles there with the arm strength, his mobility, that you can put him in favorable situations from a scheme standpoint to build confidence. And once that guy gets going, I think other players in that locker room will feed off of his energy because that's something he does. He brings energy to the huddle. He brings energy to the sideline. He's a player's player. He's a guy in the huddle that you look at and you go, this guy's in command. So I felt like those were things for me, for Desmond Ritter, that he could play at the NFL level in the right situation and could potentially be the best quarterback in that draft class.
I want to see it.
Yeah, me too.
Because you get to the point where it's, why wait? Let's see what we have. And it's not just the aspect of him and his development, but more so the team's development. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of good things going on offensively for them. That's it for the quarterback changes. Let's move on to recap of week 4. We had some big games. It was a week where one team finally got their first win. Raiders beat the Broncos 32-23. For me, what I was really impressed about the Raiders win, if you're a Raiders fan, you saw that their first 3 games of the year all came down to the wire. And for whatever reason, something happened that led to them losing the game. This week, the Broncos score a late touchdown with like 8 minutes to go in the game. The Raiders get the ball, and they've got, if you're a true Raider fan, pretty soon the ball's going to be turned over in some capacity. And here comes Denver having an opportunity to win it. That didn't happen. The Raiders were able to have like kind of a big boy TD drive to secure the win. They looked really good running the ball. And I'll tell you what, if Josh Jacobs looks like that when given the opportunity, why isn't he getting the opportunity to do that more often?
All the guys done since he got in the NFL is produce. The story about him living in a car and all that stuff, before the NFL draft and where he is today. This is one of those games where you talk about guys that need volume. And he got 28 carries, 144 yards, averaged over 5 yards a carry, had 2 scores. And he was basically got 28 out of the 30 running back touches, the other 2 going to Zamir White. And he also had 5 receptions for 31 yards. He had 33 touches for 170 yards and 2 scores at 5.3 yards per touch. Now, is that going to happen every single week? No. But again, get your best players of football. That's Davante Adams, right? Renfro's been banged up. Waller didn't have a great game. They've struggled to get him involved, I think, at the level that I feel like they should. Maybe that's, who knows? I couldn't speak to why that is. Again, get your playmakers involved. But Josh Jacobs is a guy that I feel like needs to get 20, 25 touches per game. He needs to be treated like an RB1. I haven't seen enough out of Zamir White to feel confident that he should be splitting even a 70-30 split. Like, this is how those games should go. If Josh Jacobs is healthy and it's a game that is not a blowout one way or the other, then Josh Jacobs needs to be that guy. If we're up 20 or down 20, you can give Zamir White all the carries you want. But I'm going to live and die by Josh Jacobs. They didn't sign him to his fifth year deal on his rookie contract, right? They want to wait and see. Run him into the ground and see what you get. And if he proves he's worthy, sign him to another contract. If you think Zamir White's your guy of the future, you don't want to pay your running backs and let him go on somewhere else in free agency or figure out if you're going to use the franchise tender on him. But let's use Josh Jacobs.
It was a great win. And you look at the Denver offense, and this is an offense that's been kind of ridiculed a little bit early on, wondering what Russell Wilson is either doing or what he has left in his tank. What was your takeaway on their offense and what they were able to do? I know for me, I think you brought it up earlier, when we were talking prior to the show, but Courtland Sutton's he's a wide receiver 1 through and through. He looks to be an alpha receiver.
No, this is why I was high on Courtland Sutton over Jerry Jeudy, Russell Wilson coming in and just based on skill set and their profiles. But Courtland Sutton's got 35 targets to Judy's 23. He's getting the targets in the red zone. He's on pace for 1,600 yards on the season. And that's with Russell Wilson not putting up great numbers. That's just being the alpha in this offense. And the thing about Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett was something had to give, right? Nathaniel Hackett likes to attack the middle of the field. Russell Wilson likes to attack outside the numbers vertically. Well, you have that guy in Courtland Sutton, whereas Jerry Jeudy, to me, he's not your Tyler Lockett. Jerry Jeudy is your guy that's short to intermediate. that's got a lot of speed that can make things happen after the catch, and not, we don't need to make him a vertical guy unless he's running a slot fade, slot corner, over routes. That's where I want to see Jerry Jeudy get used. And I think that's where they've got to figure that out. And if Denver can do that, and you may have to, because look, here's the reality. Your running game is not great. Your offensive line has not played at the level that we thought they would this year. Now you lose Javonte Williams. They may have to let Russ cook by necessity. And so they've got to figure out schematically how they're going to utilize those weapons. Alberto is a non-factor. Greg Dulcich is a pass-catching tight end that's been hurt. He's out again this week. Hopefully he'll start getting some playing time, but he could step up. But they're starting – they've got 3 different tight ends they're using right now. Andrew Beck, being an H-back tight end they've used in the first week of the season. We don't know what this offense is yet, and that's crazy after 4 weeks.
Yeah, and you don't know what it's going to be now that they don't have Williams back there. So
yeah,
it was a good week for the AFC West after it's been struggling, and that was due to a lot with what Kansas City was able to do with Tampa Bay. Chiefs win 41-31. Really impressive rushing attack. Really impressive throws by Mahomes. We'll let you get into those throws.
Jesus.
But the rushing attack with Clyde Hilaire, 19 carries, 92 yards, had a touchdown rush. Also had a touchdown reception. And then Isaiah Pacheco, a lot of people like a 5th round, 6th round, 7th round draft pick, whichever he was, isn't really going to – sure, he was everyone's darling in the preseason, much like Darwin Thompson was 3 years ago. Well, Pacheco looks to be – he's a hard runner. He looks really good when given the opportunity. So what were your thoughts on that game, Coach?
Well, talking about Pacheco real quick, this is going to be high praise, but he reminds me a little bit of Chris Johnson from Tennessee. If you remember him, a 2,000-yard rushing season. He doesn't have that big frame, but he runs with power for a smaller guy. I like what we've seen out of Pacheco. He had 17 snaps this week versus 18 for McKinnon. McKinnon was the guy that was the clear RB2. He's getting 35% of the running back snaps. And this week it was more even between him and Pacheco. Pacheco also had 3 kick returns for 91 yards. So I like what we're seeing with Pacheco. I like the efficiency of CEH in this offense. The guy's a touchdown scoring machine. 19 carries for 92 yards, a score. And then potentially the play of the year, with Patrick Mahomes escaping, spin move, attacks the line of scrimmage, dodges the linebacker spin move, and then does a little, pop pass, which you think you would see. Absolutely awesome. So it's Kansas City, Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. It's so much fun to watch, but it's the offense that I thought it was going to be coming this year was not as much verticality, more of that short game, let these guys work. You're starting to see Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, and I don't know why I can't remember the other receiver off the top of my head now, McCole Hardman and MVS. There's not, which we talked about going in the sweep, which is why I didn't like the Kansas City receivers, because you never know from week to week who's going to be the guy. This was another one of those weeks. It was a Travis Kelce show. It was a CEH show. And everybody else, it was kind of spread out a little bit. So, but what a fun offense to watch. They're attacking teams kind of, I think, the way that we thought they would. And Mahomes being Mahomes.
Mahomes being Mahomes. What a lot of people are worried about is you talk about this rookie receiver class and being a little bit worried that Sky Moore has not flashed more. And that wasn't supposed to be a pun, but it worked.
Hey, Sky's the limit.
If you look at his air yards, if you look at the plays that he is making, I'm pretty excited if I have Sky Moore. I think that he's got a lot of ability, and I can't wait for him to really fully be unlocked.
Yeah, I'm still big on Sky Moore. I still think Sky Moore's got a lot of talent. I think they're going to figure this out. I think because of the receivers they had, MVS being a veteran, of course, Travis Kelce, what they do with him in the passing game, Juju Smith-Schuster being a veteran, I think it was one of those situations where, like, hey, look, we have enough of a supporting cast. We don't have to make Sky Moore a feature in this offense. We can allow him to learn by example, watch the veterans, watch how they practice, watch how they break down film, and learn and be able to use him in different ways. And so I think when you get into weeks 8, 9, 10, I think you're going to start to see Sky Moore be a bigger part of that offense. At least I hope so. I certainly think the talent level is there for him to be a bigger part of this receiving corps.
Tom Brady. Concerns if you have a roster with him on it right now, because they didn't look very good offensively, and I'm not sure if that was Kansas City's defense or whatever issues they may have. You did see Godwin back, Evans back. What are you doing with the Tampa Bay offense, and are you concerned about them?
I'm not, and I'm not because of who they have, right? I'm not, because they have Chris Godwin coming back. We know what he can do, 160 targets last year. We know what Mike Evans can do. This has been an opportunity for Mike Evans to prove that he's an absolute alpha with Chris Godwin out. And he's done exactly that. That guy's an absolute monster. And if the guy hadn't missed a game, he's so pivotal what they do on that offense. But I think there's enough talent there. Leonard Fournette looks just as good as he did last year. There's not as much running room as he had last year, but he's making the most of his touches. I like what they're doing. They don't have the tight end position. K-Dot hopefully can come on a little bit. I'm not super impressed with Cameron Brate, but we knew Cameron Brate was going to have a role. As long as he has a role, Brady's going to continue to try to look at him when he needs to. But I'm not concerned with Tom Brady because, A, it's Tom Brady. B, it's the same offensive scheme he's been accustomed to, and you're getting your star receivers back. I think Evans and Godwin are as good as it gets in terms of 1-2 combinations in the NFL. So I think offensively they'll get right. They're just the offensive line. I mean, they've just been battered up front, between who they lost and guys they brought in. They've had some guys already miss games this year. So they just got to figure out that offensive line. And once they do that, they'll start clicking again.
All right, moving on. Buffalo finds a way to get a win. Baltimore once again in another tight game, but the Bills get it out 23-20. That's a pretty good team up there in Buffalo, huh?
Yeah, I think from a roster perspective, they're as well built as any team in the league. And I think San Francisco's up there in terms of defensively and skill set players. They just got to figure out that quarterback position. But because they have the elite quarterback as well in Buffalo, I think it's as good of a roster as you'll find. Josh Allen struggled a little bit in the passing game, 19-36, only throws for 213 with a pick, a touchdown, but 11 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown. That's what you're going to get from Josh Allen. He's got the ability to make things happen. He's a linebacker with the ball in his hands. You've seen him truck people. You've seen him give a stiff arm and throw a DB to the ground. So I love the leadership of that team. I think we have to give a lot of props to Devin Singletary. There's two things I want to hit on in Buffalo. Devin Singletary has become the clear number one. We thought James Cook, with a great landing spot, is going to get passing game work. It's not. It's been Devin Singletary, who, again, had 5 targets. He's got 21 targets on the season. He had 4 catches for 47 yards, 11 carries, 49 yards. So he's close to 100 yards total. He had 11 out of the 14 touches in the running back room. Zach Moss had 3, and James Cook didn't get anything. So and I'm going to give Jacob Sanderson a shout-out. We were joking around about this before we jumped on, but he said Devin Singletary – I'm going to probably phrase this the wrong way. Devin Singletary is the Jacoby Myers of the running back room in Buffalo. That's such a great analogy. Touches from the 20 to 20, doesn't seem to find the end zone a whole lot, but he's relevant every single week, and that defines Devin Singletary, I think, as good as you can. But the other point I want to make is Gabe Davis, right? Here's a guy we thought you were either all in on Gabe Davis or you weren't. And what we've seen so far, week 1, 88 yards receiving, gets the touchdown. Over the last 3 games, he's only got 14 targets. In the 3 games he's played, Now, the first game, he was able to get that long touchdown. He missed week 2. He has 8 receptions for 138 yards and 1 touchdown total. That was his first week, right? He's only averaging 3 targets a game. If he doesn't get the big play, he's not getting the red zone targets that we thought he would get. He's not converting to touchdown, the efficiency that he had last year. I think everybody realized, hey, the touchdown regression is going to happen. It's probably going to come down unless the volume is a lot better than it was last year. He's not getting the volume, and he's not getting the touchdowns. So what are you doing with Gabe Davis?
That's a tough one. Unfortunately, I don't have to worry about that because when his value was so – say that again?
We don't have any shares of him. I think I got one.
No. The only share I had of him, I traded him away for a 23 first rounder prior to the season. And that seemed like a no-brainer. But, yeah, I think it always goes back to this for me, and that is when draft capital matters. And it's not very often you get a guy like Antonio Brown who goes from a 5th rounder to being an alpha. And that's kind of what a lot of people were expecting out of Gabe Davis, is for him to all of a sudden be someone that he may not be. He was a great complimentary person, always has been. And last year when he had his 4 touchdowns in the playoff game, he just popped. Can he sustain that? He hasn't been able to so far. Moving over to are you as surprised as I am that Seattle, a team that many people thought they weren't interested in Jimmy G so that they can tank to get their quarterback of the future, and here they are with Geno Smith, and they put up 48 points in a 48-45 win, and they're 2-2. What's going on in Seattle, Coach?
Geno Smith's got it all figured out, man. I mean, and look, sometimes this is Kurt Warner. I mean, look at other guys that couldn't figure out a way to make it, and now you get Geno Smith. Last week, 23 of 30, 320 yards, 2 touchdowns, 49 yards rushing, gets in the end zone in the rushing game. In his last 2 games, he's 55 out of 74, a 74% completion rate, 645 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he's only been sacked 6 times all season. He's throwing out of a clean pocket. He leads the NFL in completion rate at 77.3% on 132 attempts. That's 33 attempts a game. It's not like he's only throwing the ball 10 times a game.
Right.
They're letting Geno cook. Like, I think that's what is so crazy about this offense. If you look at him historically over the course of his career, he was like a Teddy Bridgewater, game manager. Don't turn the ball, try not to turn the ball over. We're going to try to protect you with the run game. And shoot, now we're seeing DK Metcalf be a little bit more involved. We're starting to see where Tyler Lockett can be that vertical threat. We're starting to see Geno Smith push the ball downfield vertically. You have to watch, and there's enough games now. When you get into 1-2 games and you start talking about projections way too early, you get into 4 games that are completely over, you're basically 25% done with your season, and the guys continue to put up the numbers. I don't think it's sustainable, but I love what Geno Smith is doing. I love what they're doing from a scheme standpoint. I love the offense they're calling in Seattle. I do have some concerns about Rashad Penny. I mean, he had 17 carries, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's finished last year with a crazy, I think, 6.3 yards a carry. He's averaging 6 yards again this year. But again, it's home run or bust. He's 49 carries for 292 yards with 2 touchdowns, only 5 targets in the passing game. So it's going to be, if you're going to play Rashad Penny, in standard, he's great. If you're going half PPR, the further you go up, the less value he has. But if I'm a Rashad Penny owner right now, I'm selling high, especially in Dynasty. I'm selling high all day long. He's not going to be worth more than he's worth right now. And he's had, I think 2 good games out of the 4. So you can split that up 50-50.
Right.
He's a home run hitter. I get it. But again,
I mean, you got to sell also because at some point Kenneth Walker's going to get
Walker.
He's going to, and whether or not, here's the thing, everything we're talking about from the fantasy perspective. From the football perspective and winning games, Rashad Penny's exactly what Carroll wants. And that's the same thing with Geno Smith. They're happy with what they're getting from those guys because that's the style of football they want to play. So we fantasy managers may not like it, but Seattle Seahawks fans enjoy a 2-2 record if they do, because again, many of my friends who are Seahawks fans were kind of hoping they were going to do the old tank for one of the quarterbacks.
And look at that division.
Right.
49ers look great. Cardinals have not looked great. The Rams have not looked great. Seattle's right.
The 49ers are, they have 2 losses.
The whole division's 2-2.
Right. So, Seattle, if they make the playoffs this year, Pete Carroll and John Schneider will be enjoying.
He needs to drop the mic and walk off.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. See you later, Russell Wilson. Moving on to the other NFC West game, and this was the game Monday night. 49ers 24, Rams 9. We had a question last week. In fact, one of the questions we asked we kind of missed on, and that's because we didn't think Josh Jacobs would put up the kind of game he would because they hadn't shown the willingness to feed him like they did. But one of the questions was, do we think Jimmy G will put up 15 points or more? Whether he did or not, Jimmy G was the Jimmy G that you would expect to see in this game. He certainly managed it. He had a great completion and then just allowed Deebo Samuel to be Deebo Samuel. And the 49ers looked like a Jimmy G-led 49er win game.
No, they did. He was 16-27 for 240 and a touchdown. Jeff Wilson, 18 carries, 74 yards. You hit that one on the head. You and I didn't agree on that one, but looks like you're winning there. I didn't think Jeff Wilson would be sustainable, but he's certainly proven to be the RB1 right now as long as Elijah Mitchell is out. And like you said, Deebo being Deebo. That catch and run that he had, 6 for 115 and a touchdown. You take away that one, it's like 5 for 40. But the point is, that's why you give Deebo the ball. Again, this is an offense that understands get the ball in the hands of my favorite players. My only complaint is, can we get George Kittle some touches?
What's going on with that, Coach? Because, I mean, this goes back to the Kyle Pitts thing. And here's the thing is that my concern with it being a schematic thing is that it's the same system. It's the same quarterback. So then you got to question, is there something wrong that we don't know about with George Kittle?
Yeah, I'd have to look up the numbers. I don't have them in front of me right now, and I won't waste time on when we're live to look them up. But I do know that his inline, which is not any different than last year, he's in line as much as he was last year. There's not a lot of change there. But the difference is his route participation, and this is why I need to look it up because I might misquote this a little bit, but it just seems like George Kittle is not the first read in most of their progressions. He's the second read or the third read. And that's disappointing. And of course, he's being used a ton, as always. He's one of the best blocking tight ends in the game, which is why you almost wish he wasn't so goddamn good at it because he would be playing in the slot and out wide a little bit more to take advantage of mismatches in the passing game. But George Kittle absolutely loves to block. He'll tell you that. He takes more pride in pancaking somebody or someone busting a long run off of one of his blocks that, Shanahan's like, well, if you love it so much, we're just going to continue to do it, and you're not going to complain about it, so we're okay. It's crazy. But if you talk about the other side of the ball with the Rams, I mean, Matthew Stafford looks he does not look good. Completion percentage is 32 of 48. But if you look at his average, completion, and he only threw for 254 yards and he had the pick. They have not looked good. The run game has not looked good. Cam Akers had more carries than Darrell Henderson, but only 1.6 yards per carry versus 4 for Darrell Henderson. It just hasn't been there for Cam Akers, and you can tell they're almost trying to force that situation because of his home run capability, and they're kind of forcing touches, and it's just not there, And then Cooper Kupp, if you watch the game, and I think look at the all-22 film, but if you watch the game, Matt Stafford is staring down Cooper Kupp. And I get it, 14 catches, 122 yards, only 8.7 yards per reception. I mean, he didn't find the end zone. Tyler Higby, 10 for 73, is all of a sudden a top 8 tight end. But they're not even trying to look at Allen Robinson. And I get it. He struggles to create any separation whatsoever. Seems like when they try to target him deep, he can't. He's not even going up and attacking the 50-50 ball. It seems like the DB's always got leverage on him. They're having to force the ball to Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higby, and it's just not. It's not working. It's not working out for them. They got to find a way to challenge teams more vertically, and it's just not happening.
Well,
I think,
yeah, because right now it looks like he only trusts Cooper for whatever reason, and the tight end, the guy that he's got a lot of experience with. Yeah, but it doesn't look pretty. And the problem with what the Rams have done, and first and foremost, any fan base would be happy with what the Rams have done. They got their Super Bowl championship last year and a game that got to be played in their stadium. So whatever they have done to get that, you got to be happy. However, making the moves that they made, they don't have any first-round picks, for years, I don't think. They've used all that capital to get the guys over there. And like I said, it worked out with a Super Bowl win. But if this is the start of a long season for them, it's going to be tough for them to replenish when you have the salary cap issues they have and when you lack the draft capital that they lack.
Yeah, I listened to the Athletic a lot. Big shout out to those guys on my favorite podcast. And they were talking about the calculus in the draft rooms and the Rams. And the Rams seem to be a little bit more open in terms of talking about draft strategy and why they've given up these picks. And they're doing things a little bit different where they're always taught, like pick up draft capital, get picks, get young players. Build your roster inside out from homegrown talent, and then use free agents to plug and play. With the Rams, they went all in. They went out and got Matthew Stafford. They gave up picks. They went out and they got Allen Robinson. They went out and they got OBJ. They've done what they've done on the defensive side of the ball with where they brought in Jalen Ramsay. Yeah, and you can go on and on. And the reality is the calculus for them is they calculate they've had more success with 3rd, 4th, and 5th round draft picks than the cost it would be with what you get with those lower contracts without guaranteed 4 years versus if you miss in the 1st and 2nd round. And so they've done the calculus, they've done the math, and they feel like for us, this is a strategy we want to go with. But to your point, and they brought it up, what do you do 2 years from now? What are you doing to build talent around it? You had the left tackle retire, right? Aaron Donald talked about retiring. The only thing that brought him back was a chance to repeat. He might be gone. Jalen Ramsay's getting a little bit long on the tooth, although I still think he's one of the top 5 corners in the league, but that's going to eventually phase out. You've got some situations there that, hey, in 2 to 3 years, what is this Rams team going to look like? We'll see if it works out for them or not. But
I think it already has worked.
Yeah, I mean, you get a Super Bowl out of it, it's already worked. I agree
already worked out. If you got to rebuild and start all over, so be it. Because heck, I being a Southern California guy, you being a sometimes Southern California guy, it's been a while since the Rams or anybody have done. I think the last Super Bowl won by an LA area team, and they're no longer LA area, but would have been the Los Angeles Raiders in the early 80s. But let's move on to Thursday night.
Kurt Warner. You forget about Kurt. Well, I was right.
No, St. Louis.
I got you. Yeah, I realized that when I said that.
That's why I'm not really. Everyone asks, who's your team? Well, in the prime of my fandom of NFL football was college years, and we lost both the Rams and the Raiders in the same year. And then it just so happened right after that, I started fantasy football, and I've always been more of a fantasy guy now than I love the NFL, but I am not invested in a team like you are with the Cowboys. And a lot of that is because of the fact that the teams that I were invested in took off and left us in one season. Moving on to tomorrow night's game, Thursday Night Football. You got the 2-2 Broncos hosting the 1-2-1 Colts. Denver's a -3 favorite, and with an over-under of 42.5. Starting sits for this one, Coach.
Well, I got Russell Wilson. I think he's the guy you're going to play. He finished last week with 237 yards and a couple touchdowns, while also contributing 29 yards and a score on the ground. Without Javonte Williams in that run game, again, we talked about this. They've not been good, whether it's Melgo, whether it's Mike Boone, whether it's Javonte Williams. The run game has not looked good. The O-line does not look great. I think you're going to be forced into a situation if you're going to compete in the AFC West. You're going to have to throw the football a little bit, and they've got Cortland Sutton, they've got Jerry Jeudy, and they are now, by a mile, in my opinion, their best offensive weapons now with Javonte Williams out. It's time to let those guys, get involved. So Russell Wilson, I think, is a must start. I think Cortland Sutton is a must start. We talked about his numbers earlier. I won't go through that again. And then Nyheim Hines for the Colts. With Jonathan Taylor being out, Nyheim Hines becomes that guy. Now, I will say, don't be surprised if Phillip Lindsay, Deion Jackson are going to get some of those carries in early down work or short yards goal line situations between the tackle runnings. Not something Nyheim Hines does well. Doesn't mean they won't try to force the issue a little bit, but I think you're going to see him heavily involved in the passing game with Michael Pittman and their Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson, whatever tight ends you want to throw out. They have in Indy. Seems like they've always got a full stable of tight ends, but those are the three guys to me: Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Nyheim Hines, that are must starts. Now, you could say Michael Pittman, but I want people to understand, again, what is your roster? Is it dynasty where you've got a lot of young talent, you've got a lot of really good wide receivers? Michael Pittman's not a guy you have to play this week. Patrick Surtain, PS2, is shutting people down. He's going to cover Michael Pittman as much as he possibly can. There's nobody else on that team from a receiver perspective that the Broncos should be worried about. So you might as well use PS2 against Michael Pittman as often as you can. So I just say tread lightly, because if he doesn't get the touchdown, I don't expect him to see a lot of volume in this game if PS2 is on him. So I don't play Michael Pittman unless I absolutely have to. So he's not a must start for me.
Well, a sneaky start for me, if we're going to have Surtain on Pittman, I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce the last 2 weeks has looked well.
Deep release, for sure.
He's not gotten in the end zone yet. I think that's going to happen. From the bit of film that I've watched over him the last few weeks, he looks a little bit like Adam Thielen, and I'm not just stereotyping it because he's a white receiver, but he literally goes out there and he tacks the ball at the point. I've been very impressed with what I've seen with Alec Pierce so far.
I like Alec Pierce coming out. I had him rated higher than I think most people did, and so I think I'm a little surprised how slow it's taken him to get going. And
he dealt with injury early on. I think he missed it. He did. So
yep, he did. But even because now I will say this: when you OTAs, you did hear his name quite a bit and how much they liked him, his work ethic, what he was doing in the film room. So I love that pick for you, especially in a deeper league. As far as sits go, this is a terrible matchup for Melvin Gordon. He's averaging 3.8 yards per carry. The Colts only give up 3.1 yards per carry, which is second in the NFL. He's also lost 4 fumbles on the 45 touches we talked about. with the signing of Latavius Murray, which won't have a big impact this week, but moving forward it could. Ball security. And then, of course, Mike Boone, who also hasn't fumbled. I'm not big on Mike Boone. Again, could be a guy that could get some touches this week. So, again, in deeper leagues, if you have running backs that are out due to injury, I get playing Mike Boone this week, but to me, he's not a must start. And then Albert O, 10 targets on the year. He only got 6 catches for 45 yards. Greg Dulcich is coming back, not this week, hopefully next week. And then Matt Ryan. Denver gives up 170 yards passing per game. And, again, you got Patrick Surtain, you got a secondary there, you've got the pass rush there with Bradley Chubb and those guys. So I don't love Matt Ryan this week. He only had 7 in 3 out of 4 games this year. He's had 7 or less in terms of yards per attempt, which 7 is not a bad number. It's an average number. But when you get into 6.0, 6.3, that's not great. And he's coming off a week against Tennessee where he did throw for 356 yards and 2 touchdowns, but this is a different defense. So I tell
you, Jim Irsay's not happy with what's going on in Coltville right now. I think he expected a heck of a lot more out of Matt Ryan. In fact, if you saw what a lot of the reports are, he's basically saying, "Hey, Frank Wright, hey, Matt Ryan, hey, GM, all you guys, and you are on the hot seat. Let's go. Let's turn this around."
Let's just realize this too with Matt Ryan is what this team can do. If they can rush 4, which Denver can with that D line, if you can rush 4 and drop 7 in coverage, I don't think the run game scares Denver at all. We just talked about it. They're only averaging giving up 3.1 yards per carry anyway. So I don't think Denver's worried about what the Colts do on the ground. I think it's going to be like, hey, we're going to force Matt Ryan to have to throw the football into coverage. And I think Denver comes away with this. I know it's only a 3-point spread, so I've got Denver winning 27-20.
We're not very far off. I have the Broncos winning 24-20. So, hey, but it's football. Can't wait to see it. And, let's get hard into week 5 starting tomorrow night.
You got it, man.
Hey, before we move on, I had a tweet, and I don't tweet much, but, I'm in a home league, same home league since 1994. And I tweeted last night that, the lack of activity at times, it gets frustrating. And the lack of activity – especially in home leagues. I know you and I are in like 35 to 40 leagues. And, my expectations in those leagues does not approach what I expect or what I hope for or what I'm used to in my home league. And I bring that up because I compared it to we should just turn it into a best ball league because there's not a lot of chatter. There's not a lot of people going out. And I'm 0-4. And so maybe my frustrations are related to that. I'm in a rebuild year and I've lost my key component of the rebuild, and that would be Trey Lance. And so my hopes of doing much this year are non-existent. But I do like activity, and I do kind of long for seeing things happen. It just makes the league and fantasy football more fun when people are actively involved.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I know for me, and I say this every year, but I've never said it. I say it every offseason is what I should say. This is the first time in season. We're only 4 weeks in. I'm tired of waking up Sunday morning and going through all my lineups, figuring out who's active, who's not. So I've already decided for next year I'm going to focus more on DFS and best ball, and I'm going to really hunker down and do a lot more content creation. I'm going to do a lot more things helping people win their fantasy leagues. I get a lot more pride out of start and sit questions. I got a lot more pride out of the DMs that I get to help people win their leagues and people from work and home leagues and friends of mine that guys I used to coach with that reach out every single Sunday or during the week and ask me about trades. And I'm going to focus on that. I love that more than I enjoy playing in dynasty leagues now. I get tired of setting lineups every week, but I'm going to limit that down to about 8 to 10 teams next year. And I'm going to focus on, creating a lot more content to help people win their league. That'll be
Coach, if you need help putting rosters together, or I should say putting lineups together Sunday morning, tune in at 9:00 Pacific time.
There it is.
To the Coach Approach Start, Sit, Inactive show every Sunday morning, 9 a.m., 1 hour before kickoff, and we get into all those things. If you just listen, Coach, you'd be fine.
We get into every single game, right? We get into the entire Sunday slate. We covered Thursday night on the show tonight. We get all 14 games that happen on Sunday. And if we have a chance, we'll get the Monday night's game as well. But We tell you based on matchups, based on the offense and defense and what they like to do from a scheme standpoint, who we like and who you should start. And I like to think that we hit on a lot more than we miss on. We certainly miss on some every week, as everybody does, but we hit on a lot of stuff. And so I think that, more people start tuning in and asking questions. We'll start helping people win more leagues.
Awesome, Coach. Can't wait to do it, and look forward to seeing you all Sunday morning. Have a great night.
All right, man. We'll see you.